Tonight, Mommy is going to read you a bedtime story called How Our Bodies Make Energy. Have you ever wondered what it is that helps us to get up in the morning, to tie our shoes, to read a book, and to even play sports? Why, it's energy. Sports. Energy is what we call our body's ability to do all kinds of work. Isn't that neat? However, where does all of this energy come from? And how is it made? Well, let's keep reading and find out. When we eat, we are not just doing so to satisfy a craving or the feeling of hunger. More importantly, we eat to nourish our body with the nutrients found in food, like this girl, although ice cream may not always be the healthiest choice. So how does our body receive these nutrients? Well, in each of us there are millions of tiny cells just like this one. These tiny cells in our body play an important role in keeping our body in a state of balance. This includes turning food into energy. In each of these cells there is the nucleus, cytoplasm, and small subunits known as organelles. These organelles each have their own job to do, perhaps none more important than the mighty mitochondria. The mitochondria, known as the powerhouse of the cell, is an amazing tiny subunit of a cell, also known as an organelle. One of its most important functions is cellular respiration, a process that takes in nutrients and breaks them down to create energy-rich molecules for the cell in which it resides. Some cells may have a multitude of mitochondria, or even just one. One cell is even known to have none. The amount of mitochondria all depends on how much energy the cell needs in order to function. The energy produced by the mitochondria come in the form of molecules known as ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And this is created within the inner mitochondrial membrane. Within the mitochondria, there is a fluid known as the mitochondrial matrix. This fluid contains enzymes associated with the citric acid cycle, also called TCA. When food is digested, proteins from the inner membrane and enzymes from the TCA are released. This starts the oxidation process. What happens is the oxygen is reduced in the nutrients and then converted into water and carbon dioxide. These are the electrons needed to start the electron transport chain. The mitochondria is also composed of an outer membrane layer and an inner membrane layer. The outer membrane layer protects the mitochondria much like the skin on our body. The inner membrane layer is folded many times, creating structures known as cristae. Within these cristae are carriers that receive the electrons from the matrix to bring to the electron transport chain. There is also the space between these two membranes, which is known as the intermembrane space, and this is where chemiosmosis happens. This simply means hydrogen ions are pumped from the electron transport chain for oxidative phosphorylation. The pumping of hydrogen ions produces a gradient used by the enzyme ATP synthase complex to manufacture ATP. The electron transport chain houses many other important components along with hydrogen ions and ATP synthase that work together to get the end result of ATP. This can be a little confusing and difficult to understand by just telling you, so please let me show you just how this works. The electron transport chain has many other crucial components along with hydrogen ions and ATP synthase that work to get the end result of ATP. These helpful and critical components are the complexes NADH reductase, succinate dehydrogenase, cytochrome reductase, and cytochrome oxidase. We'll call them complex 1, complex 2, complex 3, and complex 4. And in addition to these complex proteins, there are two mobile carriers involved known as ubiquinone and cytochrome C. However, that's still not all. We also cannot forget about the other crucial elements known as the coenzyme NADH, which is a reduced version of NAD, and the coenzyme that takes the electrons from the food we eat during glycolysis in the Krebs cycle, as well as oxygen, ADP, and inorganic phosphate. The ADP and the inorganic phosphate, also called the little p, when put together are what form ATP. Oxidative phosphorylation begins with NADH, which is made from glycolysis. NADH makes its stop at protein complex 1. This is where it drops off its electrons, but it also loses its hydrogen ion. Here's his electron, and here's his hydrogen ion. However, FADH2, which is also produced during the Krebs cycle, makes a stop at protein complex 2. It drops off its electron. This makes FADH less efficient in the process of making ATP. The second step is complex 1 then passes these electrons to the mobile carrier ubiquinone. Right there, there's ubiquinone. Ubiquinone then passes the electrons to protein complex 3. Protein complex 4 then receives the electrons from the cytochrome C, who received the electrons from protein complex 3. So we make our stop at cytochrome C, and then cytochrome C passes it to protein complex 4. Protein complex 4 then passes the electrons to a highly electronegative oxygen molecule. Here we have our oxygen. Oxygen molecules have a high attraction to electrons, so the oxygen pulls the electrons towards itself from protein complex 4. Here we go down the gradient. There we go. Because oxygen is very greedy, it also picks up 2 hydrogen ions from the matrix of the mitochondria to form water or H2O. And here we have 2 hydrogen ions, not to be confused with water. During the process of passing the electrons through each protein complex, the protein complexes utilize the energy from the electron to pump the hydrogen contained within the matrix out into the intramembrane space. This is done so that the intermembrane space becomes positively charged, while the mitochondrial matrix becomes negatively charged. In step 6, we take a look at those hydrogens that were released previously by the protein complexes. Now they want to come back in towards the matrix due to something called the proton motive force. So they move down above ATP synthase. This is known as chemiosmosis. In order for these hydrogen ions to come back in, they must go through the coenzyme ATP synthase. Due to the energy coming into ATP synthase from all those hydrogen ions, ADP and a little p phosphorylate, what does that mean? Well, it means that they combine and now we have our currency ATP. So as you can see, the hydrogen ions are moving down ATP synthase. All that energy takes ADP and combines it with little phosphate P, and it moves to this side where now we have ATP. This is such an awesome thing for our bodies. So now we know where ATP comes from and what ATP is. It's our energy. That's how we're able to read a book, ride a bike, and even wake up in the morning. So let's not take for granted all the healthy foods that we can eat to help obtain more ATPs. The end.